The sea is where life on Earth began. And for man, himself a product of the sea, the journey to explore and better understand this primordial world is in many ways a journey of self-discovery. With waterborne craft, the oldest vehicles known to history, the sea has driven inventions since ancient times and continues to drive it today. In this episode, we set sail from the hydrofoiling catamarans that forever changed the America's Cup to the often fatal quest to set motorized water speed records, and from the unstoppable power of nuclear icebreakers to the unseen potential of interstellar solar sails. This is the story of sea power. Over 70% of the planet we call Earth is covered by water. And more than 96% of that water is contained in the sea. Beautiful and ferocious. The sea is a world unto itself. A world of legends and awe-inspiring power. Power that we have sought to harness. And power that we have done our best to withstand. Yet for the remarkable advances that have carried us further and deeper, we have barely scratched the surface of this mysterious world. And 95% of it remains unseen by man. This experimental craft is seeking to create a completely new mode of waterborne travel. Mimicking the anatomy of water-skimming insects, this wave-adapted modular vessel, or WAM-V for short, has already earned the nickname Spiderboat. Designed by Italian engineer Ugo Conti, this scaled-down model is testing the radical technology for smoother, more efficient motion on the water, with the ultimate craft set to be a total of 29 metres long. With titanium shock absorbers mounting the 4 legs that connect the superstructure to the catamaran outriggers, the WAM-V is able to travel with the movement of waves rather than through them. Skimming over the water for incredible fuel efficiency, the full-scale Spiderboat will carry more than 7,500 litres of fuel in its outriggers. And set to be powered by twin Cummins Marine Diesel Quantum Series engines, the final craft will be capable of crossing the Atlantic Ocean with an impressive top speed of 30 knots. With inflatable hulls, the Spiderboat can be beached without damage. Its unique properties allow the craft to fold down for easy hauling out of the water. Designed to carry a range of modular cabins, the Spiderboat is built to allow a range of interchangeable uses, theoretically switching from research operations to rescue work quickly and easily. Fast, efficient and versatile, the WAM-V has already attracted interest from the US Navy. While experimental today, Spiderboat technology may be commonplace on the waters of tomorrow. Rising up above the water to cut down on surface drag and boost speed, these are boats that fly.
It's an amazing thing to watch, and it's an amazing thing to be involved with some of the engineering and what's called the Moth International Sailing Class dinghy. They've been hydrofoiling since the early 2000s.
And it is these small, single-sail, single-person yachts that did more than any other to demonstrate the technology, hailed among the most revolutionary developments in marine engineering. The Hydrofoil. Like the aerofoil design of an aeroplane's wings, hydrofoils serve to generate upwards lift.
The first thing you notice once you come up on the foils is everything goes quiet. It goes completely. I mean, you don't get this slap, 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 slap on the water. It just goes quiet. And it's like, what happened?
As the craft gains speed, the angled shape of the foil creates different pressure systems in the water, essentially accelerating fluid downward to drive the hydrofoil, and the boat up. With the bulk of the craft now travelling through the air, an environment approximately 1,000 times less dense than water, the resistant force of drag is drastically cut down, translating to an increase in efficiency and therefore speed.
It's just lifted out of the water and the drag reduces by probably a factor of 5 and accelerates. And once it accelerates, you're actually moving through the wind faster as well. So you're actually harnessing more of the wind, because as you move through the wind faster, you can actually grab more power out of the wind.
First tested on motorised boats in the late 19th century, while hydrofoils proved successful in enhancing efficiency, the complexity and cost they added to construction prevented a wider adoption of the technology in large motorcraft. Small-scale racing yachts had more freedom and incentive to experiment, and it is in the moth class that hydrofoils have really made their mark. Upscaling the hydrofoil technology developed by the smaller moth class, the new generation of racing catamarans have made the next leap in power. Capable of travelling at more than twice the speed of the wind, these boats turbocharge the most hotly contested race in sailing, the America's Cup.
So in 2013, the America's Cup reinvented itself and made 72-foot catamarans weighing about 6 tonnes each.
Thanks to their wide, multi-hull design, catamarans can accommodate a greatly expanded sail area while maintaining a lightweight, stable platform, making them the ideal vessel for hydrofoiling. Nonetheless, each of the carbon fibre hydrofoils must be able to withstand pressures of around 15 tonnes, more than twice the weight of the vessel, while maintaining a thin profile about the size of a surfboard.
We can now construct composite components on very high stiffness and very high strength and very, very low weight, which is exactly what we need to make these hydrofoil boats fly.
And it's in flight that these remarkable craft are achieving unprecedented speeds for sailing vessels.
And eventually the entire hull is out of the water, so we've got these large 6-tonne vessels being completely supported by hydrodynamics. That allowed those vessels to go from, say, 30 knots up to almost 50 knots very, very quickly.
Beyond the benefits of speed, the durability of the vessel may also receive a boost. Rather than slamming and crashing their way over the waves, hydrofoils travelling above the water are placed under less structural stress than traditional craft. These gains are not without losses, and there are concerns as to whether the power of these vessels is simply too much for a sailboat to possess. However, with the transformation of the America's Cup into something closer to F1 racing on water, the pursuit of speed shows no sign of slowing down. Combining speed with comfort, these commuter ferries are the Concords of the water. Australian manufacturer Incat has revolutionised the catamaran design to achieve the remarkable distinction of building some of the fastest ships in the world.
Well, a catamaran's a very old form of marine transport, of course. They've been around for thousands of years, one way or the other. Typically, catamarans are long and skinny hulls, which on their own would not be very useful, but when you put two hulls together, you get a nice big wide platform, which is very good for carrying light cargo, people, motor cars, etc.
Catamarans are ballast-free and therefore lighter, with lower hydrodynamic resistance than usual monohull ships. Because of this, they require less propulsive power from their motors, resulting in a very fast ship.
The boats today are replacing monohulls left, right and centre because they're more economical, they are lighter, they are wider, bigger, etc.
Incat has built a reputation on manufacturing these super-fast ships. In fact, Incat has built the last 3 consecutive winners of the Blue Riband, the prestigious award for the fastest crossing of the Atlantic by a commercial passenger ship. To date, they have built over 90 catamarans. The extraordinary speed of their vessels is attributed to 2 factors: state-of-the-art design and exceptional power. Their catamarans' long, thin hulls have a reduced buoyancy so as to pierce through waves rather than ride over them, providing a smoother, more comfortable ride for their passengers, as well as reducing mechanical stress on the vessel. Incat's fastest catamarans are powered by gas turbine jet engines, modified to breathe water rather than air. With water entering the jet units through intakes on the bottom of the boat, the engines accelerate and fire the water backward at high velocity, forcing the vessel forward in the same way a jet propels a plane.
A lot of the power of a normal propeller is lost off the tips. It goes sideways off the tips of the propeller. If it's in a tunnel, that power is more contained. So water jets are more complex, but generally at high speed more efficient.
With advanced acceleration over propellers, water jet propulsion affords high efficiency at high speeds and excellent manoeuvrability for docking at low speed, perfect for a quick commute and an easy disembarkation. When it comes to moving non-human cargo, the economy of scale has driven the development of true giants of the sea. And with big ships comes big engineering challenges and even bigger power. Giant container ships, or box ships as they are affectionately known, are the unsung heroes of mechanical engineering. And among these waterborne leviathans, it is the Maersk Triple E class that are the most advanced in the world. "400 metres long and 59 metres wide. The Triple E class is only a few metres larger than a standard box ship. But thanks to a clever layout, they can carry an additional 2,500 containers. In transporting their enhanced load, it is the slow and steady technique of the Triple E class that wins the race.
The vessel needs to actually float in a different position and orientation in the water, so that its hydrostatic forces are changed remarkably from when it has nothing on board to when it has everything on board. And the engineering actually needs to adapt to that. When a large bulk carrier is being filled, there's a very definite and very specific way that the weight needs to come on board. If it comes on board in an incorrect way, the ship can literally break in two, because the structure is not designed to carry that load in a particular condition.
While most container ships cruise at around 25 knots, the Triple E class are designed to use a technique known as slow steaming, running at an optimal speed of around 19 knots. Reducing fuel consumption by close to 60%, the slow steaming Triple E class can transport more containers with less power. But on this scale, going slower is not just a matter of easing off the throttle. The first challenge is finding engines that can run with slower revolutions. The Triple E class settled on twin two-stroke diesel engines, each with an ultra-long stroke. Fitted with a waste heat recovery system, the engines use their own exhaust gases to comfortably produce a total of 86,000 horsepower. But having efficiency in an engine is one thing, retaining it in a propeller is another. Propeller size is limited by the draft of the ship, the distance from the water surface to the lowest part of the hull. With the Triple E class requiring a propeller with a diameter larger than its draft, they opted for what's known as a twin skeg system, using two smaller propellers to achieve the combined diameter needed for maximum pushing power. And while a standard large propeller has 6 blades, two smaller propellers can each have 4. Less blades means less resistance, and less resistance means even better efficiency. At sea, big ships have plenty of room to operate. But when docking or departing from the confines of a port, they often require some gentle persuasion. Built to push around vessels more than 1,000 times their size, tugboats have an extreme power-to-weight ratio. Compact craft with disproportionately large engines, they are the muscle cars of the marine world. And without them, megaships would never be able to dock. With their oversized engines producing upwards of 27,000 horsepower, tugboats pack a lot of punch.
The size of the engine compared to the size of ship is huge. So they can basically push or pull. They can either push with a rubber fender or they can put a rope to the ship and pull the ship.
And with a narrow margin of error between a successful docking and a hugely expensive crash, most tugboat engines feature 2 of each critical part to guard against failure. But being powerful and fail-safe isn't enough to pull and push 100,000-ton ships through narrow waterways. Tugboats need to be agile, making them half sumo wrestler, half ballerina. Most modern tugboats derive their agility from azimuth thrusters, propeller units capable of rotating a full 360 degrees. With the propeller directing thrust, the need for a rudder is eliminated. The addition of ducted shrouds, known as court nozzles, around the propellers provides enhanced efficiency. Directing the water entering and exiting the propellers into a linear configuration, the tugboat's thrust-to-power ratio is given a helpful boost at low speeds, right when they need it most. With most tugs confined to sheltered waterways, seafaring is not a priority, and their hulls have evolved a heavy displacement design to suit their purpose. Already low-riding vessels, when a tugboat powers up, its hull sinks even further into the trough of its own wake. In the exact opposite of a hydrofoil, this sinking effect provides more contact with the water. More contact means more friction, and when shoving oversized ships around, the more resistance a tugboat has against the water, the better.
It's difficult to predict the trajectory of a ship, given not just the control forces involved from the propeller and the rudder, but also from environmental effects such as wind or current. And so all those effects come into play. So the tugboats are used to mitigate any problems. For example, if a ship were to run aground, then it would be a major catastrophe in a port because the port wouldn't be able to operate.
A triumph of power and design. As megaships continue to grow, the dependable tugboat will be there to shoulder the burden. While the transport of cargo has given rise to megaships, so too has the transport of people. For hundreds of years prior to the development of long-range aircraft, ocean liners were the dominant mode of travel between continents, driving the development of seafaring giants. With the travel industry powering the construction of ships, each bigger and more excessive than the last, this growth has not been without disaster. Once the biggest moving vessel ever made by man, today, the RMS Titanic looms large from its grave beneath the waves as the most infamous ship in history. This is all that's left of the vessel that was once celebrated as being unsinkable.
Titanic was built by Howland and Wolff in Belfast in Northern Ireland. She was about 47,000 tonnes, not particularly a big ship. The present famous liner, Queen Mary II, the Cunard line, for example, is 3 times the gross tonnage of Titanic. But she and her sister ship, Olympic, and the still under construction Britannic, were the largest ships on the North Atlantic.
Departing to great fanfare on its maiden voyage from Southampton, England to New York in April of 1912, the Titanic set sail with approximately 2,240 passengers and crew aboard. Powered by a combination of 2 reciprocating 4-cylinder triple expansion steam engines and a single steam turbine, the ship produced a total of 46,000 horsepower. With steam produced by 29 boilers, 600 tons of coal needed to be shoveled by hand each day. Offering the highest levels of comfort ever seen in commercial transport, while the Titanic's first-class accommodations and services stole the show, even those travelling in third class, by far the largest group aboard, enjoyed superior amenities than any other ship of the era. Four days into its voyage across the Atlantic, the Titanic received warnings of drifting icebergs from other ships in the area. Not considered a serious threat to a vessel as large and as advanced as the Titanic, the doomed passenger liner continued at its full speed of around 22 knots until moments before the jagged underwater spur of an iceberg struck its starboard side.
The iceberg cut a series of quite small holes into the shell plating of the ship below the waterline. Had those holes been in one compartment, there wouldn't have been a problem. They certainly wouldn't have arrived in New York on time.
Following the collision with the iceberg, the seams of the buckled hull separated to allow 5 of its 16 watertight compartments to fill with water. The ship could only survive the flooding of 4. Although exceeding the safety standards of the day, the Titanic carried only enough lifeboats for 1/3 of its total capacity. And in the haphazard abandoning of the ship, these precious few lifeboats were launched underfilled.
The Titanic tragedy left such a mark on everybody throughout the world, because how could something like that possibly happen? Well, it can, and it did under those circumstances.
"20 years after the sinking of the Titanic, the next big thing in ocean liners took to the seas. 10 years later, it too would meet an untimely fate. Launched in 1932, the SS Normandy was the ocean-going pride of France. With its revolutionary hydrodynamic hull and lavish Art Deco stylings, the ship was heralded as the greatest passenger liner ever created. And featuring an advanced transmission system to address the shortcomings of traditional direct-driving steam turbines, the Normandy remains the most powerful steam turbo-electric propelled passenger ship of all time. Running on more conventional steam turbines, the RMS Queen Mary boasted what is probably the largest powertrain ever built aboard a ship.
In 1931, all work at the John Brown shipyard was suspended for 3 years. Ship number 534, as she was then, sat there rusting for all that time until work was resumed.
A great day for Clydeside. Work is resumed on the Cunard number 534. It is hoped that the liner will be ready for launching this autumn.
It was resumed and she was completed in 1936, having been launched as Queen Mary. She was 1,019 feet long and about 81,000 tons gross. A large, elegant ship and the biggest liner in the world at the time.
With the majority of space on its lower 5 decks occupied by boiler rooms and engines, the combined output of the 4 Parsons steam turbines allowed a whopping 160 horsepower, allowing the Queen Mary to wrest the Blue Ribbon from the SS Normandy in 1936.
Now, after 7 years, the Queen Mary has recovered the honour and arrives at Southampton to be hailed in triumph by Britain. Well done, Queen Mary.
While the Normandy reclaimed the honour the following year, the Queen Mary won it back by setting new transatlantic records in 1938. Records that remained unbroken until the early 50s.
Queen Mary could achieve 30 knots, but the service speed across the North Atlantic was generally about 27 knots. You kept power and reserve in those ships in case of bad weather so that you could make up time, because this was very much a scheduled service. You needed to arrive and depart at the right time. And that's a great speed in those mighty ships crossing the North Atlantic.
Undergoing a successful conversion to military service during the Second World War, the passenger liner cum troop ship survived the conflict unscathed. Often travelling without escort, the Queen Mary simply outran the threat posed by enemy vessels. And during one Atlantic crossing with over 16,000 American servicemen aboard, she set another record: most passengers ever transported on a single vessel. The rise of affordable and fast jetliners changed ocean-going travel forever. Unable to compete on speed or economy, passenger liners needed to offer something that air travel could not. This is what they came up with: the MS Oasis of the Seas. The first of the Oasis-class cruise ships, she, along with her 2 sisters, represent the largest passenger ships in the world.
Amongst the largest cruise ships in the world are the Oasis-class cruise ships, which have recently been built, and they're 225,000 gross tons, which is a very large ship indeed, with a very large passenger carrying capacity.
With 16 passenger decks, the Oasis towers 72 metres above the waterline. Powered by a combination of 3 16-cylinder and 3 12-cylinder marine diesel engines, the Oasis pumps out over 130,000 horsepower. These engines not only drive the 3 electric azimuth thrusters for the ship's propulsion, but provide electricity for its lights, elevators, water treatment plant, and all other systems needed to keep the residents of this floating city comfortable and entertained. Seafaring on this scale poses a big engineering problem. With rough seas capable of battering vessels from all sides, mega ships like the Oasis class are subjected to even greater stresses as its gargantuan structure faces uneven strain across the uneven water. The Oasis withstands these shifting stresses not by force, but by calculated give and take. With its cage-like internal framework allowing a significant amount of movement, the Oasis, like all big ships, constantly bends, sags, and twists by design. Spread across the entirety of its megastructure, the degree of movement in this surprisingly limber vessel is barely perceptible to those on board. Not everyone on the water is content with pleasure cruising, and the need for speed has had as powerful an influence on sea travel as it has on travel through air and on land. With water imposing greater uncertainty and greater resistance in the form of friction, the quest for speed here is not only difficult, but dangerous. Of those brave or foolhardy enough to launch an assault on the water speed record, over 3/4 have lost their lives. By 1930, with official rules set, the water speed record had become a source of national pride, hotly contested between Britain and America. This boat, the Miss England 2, was to claim the honour for the Brits, but at great cost. With a twin-bladed screw propeller powered by twin Rolls-Royce V12 air racing engines, the Miss England 2 featured a single keel with a stepped hull to reduce friction and drag. With longitudinal notches running beneath the hull, as the boat gains momentum, these steps create a suction effect, drawing air in from the sides to generate lift. Raising the boat to reduce the wetted surface area, the area of the boat in contact with the water, stepped hulls improve efficiency, allowing more speed with less horsepower.
As a powerboat goes faster, if the design is in such a way that you can actually use some of those hydrodynamic forces, such as a very large surface for planing, when the water actually hits that surface, it gets deflected downwards and can actually make a significant vertical hydrodynamic force and literally lifting the entire boat out of the water in the same way that we talked about with the hydrofoils.
On the ominous date of Friday the 13th of June 1930, pilot Sir Henry Seagrave, along with his mechanic and chief engineer, set out on Lake Windermere to chase down glory. During 2 successful runs, they averaged a speed of over 85 knots, nearly 160 kilometres per hour. With a new record in hand, the third run sought to push the average even higher, but ended in disaster. With the boat thought to have struck a floating branch, when the spray from the crash cleared, the engineer was dead. While the mechanic survived with a broken arm, Seagrave regained consciousness just long enough to ask the fate of his men before dying from acute lung injuries. Salvaged and repaired, the boat itself went on to set new water speed records throughout the early 1930s. But as the race continued, it was to be rendered slow by a new breed of speedboat. In 1955, this boat, the world's first successful jet-powered hydroplane, started a revolution in speed. The British-built K7 Bluebird reigned over the water for more than a decade, setting 7 world records and adding nearly 160 kilometres per hour to the target. Nicknamed the Blue Lobster for its forward set of stabilising sponsons, the K7 Bluebird was representative of the departure from single-keel speedboats to a 3-pointer hydroplaning design. Operating on the same principle as a hydrofoil, at speed, the Bluebird generated sufficient lift to raise the majority of its hull out of the water, minimising drag to maximise speed and efficiency. Constructed with a lightweight aluminium body, the K7 was built around an ultra-rigid steel frame and powered by a Metropolitan Vickers Beryl turbojet engine that produced a whopping 16 kilonewtons of thrust. Developed by British speed demon Donald Campbell, the first person to set both land and water speed records in the same year, the K7 was both his glory and his downfall.
Once you start going at these very, very high speeds, a very small change in that force balance could create quite a catastrophic change in how the boat's going through the water.
Modifying the Bluebird constantly throughout his career and piloting it to even greater speeds, it was in the bid to set his 8th water speed record that Campbell paid the ultimate price. With his sights set on being the first to break the 300 mile per hour mark, a goal that meant increasing his current record by over 40 kilometres per hour. Campbell took to Caniston Water in the English Lake District in 1967. Now under the power of a lighter and more powerful Bristol Siddeley Orpheus engine boasting 20 kilonewtons of thrust, Campbell's initial run was just below his 300-mile target, averaging 479 kilometres per hour. His second dash was even faster. But when travelling at an uncharted speed of over 510 kilometres per hour, the craft began lifting from the surface, ultimately going beyond its critical pitch and taking off from the lake before cartwheeling to a violent stop. Campbell was killed instantly. Above and below the surface, the sea is a world of extremes. To carry us further on and deeper into the sea, we have to develop vessels that are equally extreme, penetrating some of the most inhospitable places on the planet.
The ocean surface is ever-changing, and it creates an environment that I would suggest as a naval architect means that putting structures into that environment that is one of the most challenging engineering opportunities we have as modern scientists and engineers.
Icebreakers are among the most robust vessels on the sea. Operating where others fear to tread, they clear the path for merchant vessels needing to transport cargo through frozen trade routes, as well as conducting research missions in Arctic and Antarctic waters.
Suppose the sound of a ship breaking ice at speed is like living inside a coffee grinder or something. It's incredibly loud, and it's accompanied at the same time by the motion of kicking back and forth, because even if the ship is going fast and breaking ice very efficiently, it's still being buffeted. And you can feel it. You can feel it, and it's intense.
Since the age of sail, ships operating in the polar regions have been built with various measures to combat ice. But the modern steam or petrol-driven icebreaker took shape in the early 20th century. While design has continued to evolve and breakthroughs, both literal and figurative, continue to be made, perhaps the most significant advance was the incorporation of nuclear power. Launched by the Soviet Union in 1957, the NS Lenin was not only the world's first nuclear-powered icebreaker, but the first nuclear-powered surface vessel. Raw power counts for a lot when coming up against a substance with roughly the same tensile strength as concrete.
Crunching and crashing her way through the frozen Arctic, the Russian atom-powered icebreaker Lenin was on an unusual assignment.
And the ability to run continuously for years without refueling is a great advantage when operating in some of the most remote regions on the planet. Today, the nuclear-powered variety of icebreakers remain the most powerful, and all of them are Russian. In terms of design, for icebreakers, hulls are everything. Built with double hulls to ensure integrity against the increased loads placed upon them, they are constructed with a particular grade of steel, resistant to brittle fracture in extremely cold temperatures. The sloping shape of the icebreaker's bow allows it to be driven up on top of thick ice, where the weight of the ship presses down to break it apart. Also in the icebreaking arsenal can be a bubbler system, which forces compressed air through holes in the bow to form a cushion of air between the ship and the ice. If the ship becomes trapped, a healing system can be used, pumping tons of water from one side of the ship to the other in order to rock it free. And with abrasion-resistant coating, the last job of the icebreaker's hull is to safely clear broken debris, forging a path for others to follow. The crushing, pitch-black waters of the deep sea remain the least explored region of our planet. And the safest, most efficient way of venturing to these mysterious depths is with unmanned craft. Remote-operated vehicles, ROVs for short, represent a new breed of sea power. Considered the Swiss Army knife of underwater robots, ROVs have applications in everything from surveying wrecks to military mine hunting.
Tethered systems have a wire going back to a control, and the person controlling it will look through a camera or a sonar system and then detect to see what it is, and then they'll make the decision what needs to be done and they'll bring it back.
By far, the greatest use of ROVs is in scientific research, shining a light into some of the planet's most challenging and poorly understood waters. Operated by the US-based National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, the Deep Discoverer, nicknamed D2, is a cutting-edge ROV, bringing us closer than ever to the mysterious biology and geology of the deep sea. Operating in tandem with a camera sled unit serving to illuminate the D2 and provide a wide-angle view for the topside pilots, the Deep Discoverer is connected to its launch ship by an umbilical cable. Neutrally buoyant, this cable effectively separates the ROV from the motions of the ship whilst powering the D2 and instantly transmitting its data back to the surface. With its high-definition camera and specialised robotic arm for sample collection, D2 is providing scientists with a clear look at environments that have never been seen before. Constrained by their connection to a ship and the stamina of their human handlers, ROVs provide a detailed but limited picture of the ocean. But it is autonomous underwater vehicles, AUVs, that offer a broader understanding of the vast marine world. Once programmed for their long-range missions, these vehicles are let loose, returning to base on their own once the assignment is complete.
When things are under the water, radio waves don't transmit under the water. So you either have to use sound or they have to be pre-programmed and they'll come up to the surface and then do a radio transmission or go back under, and that's where autonomy is really important. So it gets told what it needs to do and it can make decisions while it's down under there.
While AUVs are in keeping with the trend toward autonomous craft in the air and on the roads, in the aquatic environment, a greater degree of engineering challenges needed to be overcome. The first was communication. With radio waves unable to travel very far through water, unmanned underwater vehicles had to get smart.
When they detect something or on their preset pattern, if something's in the way, it can then make a decision to reprogram itself for what search pattern it needs to go on or what it needs to look for. So it has a limited level of artificial intelligence.
Travelling without GPS and with minimal contact with human handlers, AUVs navigate via sonar or dead reckoning calculations, with many changing their mission profile in response to the environmental data they collect and analyse. The high drag inherent in water means that propulsion is another challenge. Typically running on long-range electric motors, AUVs tend to employ efficient propellers, often with ducted quart nozzles. For even longer stints at sea, underwater gliders use their aerofoil wings to convert the vertical motion of repeated ascents and descents into horizontal propulsion.
They can either look like an aircraft or some of them look like just simple torpedoes. They have a device in there that simply changes the buoyancy from one end to the other, so it just pumps a little bit of liquid in a tube forward and back. What that does is change the buoyancy of the system so it starts to sink, so this thing will dive down. When it gets to a set depth, it changes the buoyancy back and it just comes back up. So it's actually gliding in the ocean.
Innovating to meet the challenges imposed by the sea, AUVs are at the forefront of the modern quest to better understand the ocean.
Part of their mission is to go to places we haven't been before, to help us collect data that we haven't been able to collect in the past, to collect samples that we don't already have, and to fill in our understanding about how things look, what their history is, why they work the way they do, and what the future holds.
And the innovations do not stop with the sea. The technology developed here is powering travel beyond the waves and beyond the planet. A planet-detecting satellite launched in 2009, the Kepler spacecraft's mission was to monitor the brightness of distant stars within the Milky Way. With its high-powered photometer, Kepler was set to keep watch for the periodic dimming around stars that would indicate the orbiting of potentially Earth-like planets outside our solar system.
What is really cool about this telescope is how it's actually controlled in space. It is literally floating through space. It is being steered through space like a sailboat.
Aiming and stabilizing its photometer via a series of 4 reaction wheels, when 2 of these wheels jammed, the mission was on the brink of failure. But one radical idea offered a solution, a concept first dreamed up by the 17th century astronomer for whom the Kepler spacecraft was named. By harnessing the power of solar winds, the pressure exerted on spacecraft by photons within sunlight, the Kepler could be stabilized against this force.
We point Kepler at a direction of the sun so that as the wind comes from the sun, it keeps it in spot and keeps it pointing. So as Kepler moves around the sun, we keep pointing it so that sail is pointing at the wind of the sun.
It was harnessing the solar wind that steadied this craft, allowing it to continue its planet-hunting mission. While the Kepler became a solar sailboat out of necessity, spacecraft like the light sail are doing it by design.
So this is a giant satellite that's going to deploy a sail. They want to point the sail at the sun, and when a big burst of wind comes from the sun, push it, and that will accelerate the satellite through space.
The light sail aims to be the first controlled solar sail in the Earth's orbit, testing the viability of the technology for transporting scientific payloads, potentially even human passengers, through space. Launched by conventional rockets, once in space, the light sail unfurls its 32 square meters of reflective mylar sail. As the photons of sunlight continually hit and bounce off the sail, they transfer their momentum, propelling the spacecraft in a similar manner to a sailboat on a sea. But unlike the water, the vacuum of space offers no resistance to movement, and a solar sail is able to constantly accelerate, theoretically building speeds 5 times faster than rockets.
In space, there's nothing to stop you. So once you're going, there's no air, there's no wind. So if you can get a burst of speed, 20% the speed of light, you can get a satellite that goes through space 20% the speed of light. So we can actually have interstellar travel in only a few decades with the same technology and same style of boat goes through the ocean.
Reimagined, the ancient engine that is the sail is set to gracefully carry us further than ever before, opening the door to new galaxies.